Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm Megan Knowles, writer and reporter with Becker's Hospital Review. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. We're looking forward to hearing your questions. Additionally, in about a week following the webinar, we'll be sending you a copy of the presentation to the email you used to register. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Bill Christie, Senior Services Director for Workforce Management with GE Healthcare, to begin our webinar today.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending. I would also like to introduce our two presenters today, Emily Handwork, the VP of Information Systems for Memorial Hermann, and Jessica Rivas, Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Memorial Hermann Cypress Hospital. Next slide, please. With all the chaos, uncertainty, and change in the healthcare industry, you need your workforce management strategy to be a stabilizing force. By focusing on developing a workforce management strategy that impacts staff engagement, quality of care, and labor cost containment, you can build organizational resilience. Next slide. A better workforce management strategy can provide the foundation to navigate the challenge of delivering quality patient care with shrinking budgets. We're seeing more and more of our clients take a systematic, focused approach to capturing more value from their staffing and workforce initiatives. This approach started with the discovery, where we worked with Memorial Hermann to look at their analytics and pinpoint where to focus attention. Together, we developed a plan to address their most pressing issues. Emily and Jessica will share how the execute phase used a team approach, both with Memorial Hermann, as well as strong collaboration between GE and Memorial Hermann. And as shown by this loop, we continue to work together to sustain by maintaining best practices and provide shared governance to ensure ongoing outcomes and organizational resiliency. This value capture strategy works. I'm excited for you to hear from Emily Handwork and Jessica Rivas as they show how their workforce management strategies have helped them to engage employees while saving millions. So next slide, please, and I'd like to hand it over to Emily to kick off the presentation. Thank you, Emily.
Emily, I think you're on mute and you need to unmute yourself so we can all hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys heard all that, right? Sorry about that. This is Emily Handwork of Memorial Hermann. I am on the slide where it talks about Memorial Hermann. Just wanted to tell you a little bit about our hospitals. We have 15 acute hospitals, 2 rehab hospitals. 11 of our hospitals are acute. Our admissions are over 158,000 with nearly 600,000 emergency visits a year. So just a little stats on Memorial Hermann. Next slide, please. All right, a year in the life. As we said, we have 1.9 million patient encounters, 24,800 babies delivered in a year, 3,200 life flight missions, 1,800 research studies. Again, almost 600,000 emergency room visits, 150,000 inpatient admissions, 844 inpatient days. We've been doing this at Memorial Hermann for 109 years, serving our community. Next slide, please. All right, the IT department does a lot of the implementations and project management for any projects that have IT components. And in this case, this is one of them. So just giving you an idea of how many devices, how many data centers, how many printers, just general information. And like they said earlier in the communication, we will send these slides out to you so you have this information. And if you have questions, you can always let us know. Next slide, please. All right, I wanted to give you some background. Let's start with API. API is what has been and is our time and attendance system at Memorial Hermann. It's been our time and attendance system since the, I guess, 1997, 1998. Been a long time. We have expanded outside of time and attendance to the mobile app for time and attendance. We've expanded it to staffing, moving us to allow scheduling for staffing, and then open shift notification. So as years have gone by, we've been able to add to our suite of products and add to our functionality with the API, which was sold to GE, now back to Veritas. But we went live back we went live in '99 with time and attendance with the Memorial and Hermann side. We implemented the staff module and replaced our rescue system in 2008 for staff scheduling, nurse staff scheduling. And we migrated from the iTrust system to Lawson for payroll in 2016. All of these things happened prior to us taking on this project. We moved our payroll calculations from API to Lawson to make that more streamlined, and we moved our API auto close process so that we would be streamlined and quick turnaround. All right, let's move to slide 11, and I'm going to turn it over to Jessica. Jessica, I think you're going to talk more on the operational side.
Yes. So thank you, Emily. I want to give you a little bit of background of why this project was implemented. When we were looking at our staffing and then also our costs back in 2016, Human Resources and the CNOs had a joint meeting with our, at the time, our System Chief Operating Officers. And one of the things that was asked is, how do we look at standardization of staffing, and then how do we also look at reducing costs? When we went and looked and reviewed at what our current state was, we realized is that we did have an internal Memorial Hermann float pool. At the time we called it Premier, but there wasn't a standard way that we paid them, that we made sure that they had shifts. There wasn't any float pools across shared hospitals. Like Emily said, we have 15 acute care hospitals, but there wasn't a way for us to look across our system and say, let's deploy a group of nurses in this area because there's a greater need than in this hospital. The other thing that was happening is that our current pay structure, and because we didn't have any parameters around what a PRN staff entailed, we had a huge increase of full-time, part-time nurses moving to what we called at the time supplemental, and they were getting a higher hourly rate, anywhere up towards of $10 to $15 an hour extra, but they were continuing to work side by side, their peer group in the same hospital, in the same unit with the same hours. The only caveat was that on top of working at a higher wage, they didn't have to work weekends and holidays. We also saw across the system a really high use of external agencies, and in the per diem arena, but also in the travel contract arena. On top of all of that, we were also using a lot of premium pay. And what I mean by premium pay is it's that pay of, I'm really short today, I'll pay you $5 extra an hour, or I'll pay you $10 extra an hour if you just work this shift for me. There wasn't any consistency around that either. The most important thing is that when we were looking at all of these challenges that we were faced with, there wasn't a visibility or transparency into what was happening across the system. We really, really wanted to standardize things, but we didn't know who was doing what, when, how. And so that was what led us to implementing this project. And so we were asked, like I said, by our system COO to come up with a solution and then implement it, and then quantify what that looked like and attach a dollar savings to that. Next slide. So the very first thing that we had to do is that we had to look at our workflows, how we staff. We couldn't just implement a piece of technology and expect that the technology was going to change our problem. So what we did was we got a group of people together, and we created a new staffing model. That model looked at how we standardize PRN people across our system. It also looked at creating local or regional float pools. And so we had a tiered system. We presented that to HR and to our senior leadership at system. That was approved. So then the next thing that we did was we said, we need a technology to be able to support this new staffing, this variable staffing model that we want to implement, so that we know real time what is going on and ensuring that everyone is following those guardrails and that standard that we set through. The other thing that we really wanted to do was start pushing scheduling and staffing into the hands of the frontline people. And we knew that we could do that through the mobile application of My Time and Attendance. One great thing about this new model is it really ensured that the staff are all meeting the commitment levels for the positions. We had a large group of PRN nurses that we were paying, but they weren't meeting those minimum requirements. But before we implemented the new technology, we weren't able to see who was meeting that requirement, what part of the requirement that they were meeting, who was exceeding the requirement. And so that was really important to us. The next thing that was really important and helped with employee engagement was the ability to allow the staff self-scheduling and to be able to use that mobile technology. I don't know what nurse or person nowadays doesn't have a phone in their hand 24/7, but to be able to use that mobile technology in real time to alert them that there are open shifts and for them to be able to pick up those shifts. That was one of the catalysts that really helped us reduce our overtime and helped reduce our premium pay and agency utilization. Next slide. So the project implementation. The very first thing that we needed to do is we needed to do an upgrade to our current version of API. This is where we added the open shift notification. Like I said, it's where staff are notified that there is a open shift available. It also allowed us with that upgrade to have the mobile time management application where staff on their phone have a mobile app and they're able to see their schedule, and more importantly, they're also able to see their time card, which they really much enjoyed. The next thing that we did is to try to get some transparency around staffing was we created this, we call it a CSO. It's basically a current staffing overview, and it'll tell you, how many staff that you need, in what areas, on what shift, on what unit. We also went through and we looked at all of the staff in each unit and said, what does that particular unit need for qualifications for that staff? An example would be if you have an ICU unit, that staff member's qualifications are, if it's a nurse, that they have an RN license, that they have basic life support, but they also have advanced life support. And we went through each area and made sure that we had those licensing requirements and that we had the competency requirements. This was really important because when you get to the staff notification part, we wanted to make sure, because our system was so large and we have so many employees, that we weren't moving people into an open need that weren't qualified and create a patient safety issue. And then that might result in some confusion over time or delays in care. One of the next things that we did is we looked at how people are going to self-schedule. We know that self-scheduling is really important, but we also know, more importantly, in healthcare, that we have to be able to have the people to deliver the care that their patients are needing and requiring. And so what we did was we created a cadence. Everyone agreed to it, and then we made it standard all across all 15 hospitals in our system. Then the last thing that we did was then we had the building of the local float pools and then the central staffing, which is our float pool for the whole entire Memorial Hermann system. And with that new scheduling cadence, we allowed the full-time, part-time people to go first, and then central scheduling can be able to plug all those PRN people that are in the local and system float pools to kind of fill those holes. The goal is to get those holes plugged in with staff before the schedule is actually published, which is 2 weeks before it actually starts. One of the great things that we did in working with our decision support group is that we were able to get a pull from our Cerner Care 4 which has our census. And so that inputs into the ability for, in that central screen, to be able to see, I have a staffing matrix. My census is only 4 at this period of time. And then 4 hours later, we look and it went up to 10. What is the difference in that 4-hour increment of what we need for staff? Do you need to bring more staff in, or do you need to call staff off? And then the last thing that we did with Joint Commission is looking at worker fatigue and looking at how many shifts is it reasonable for staff to work. We found in pulling some data that a lot of staff were working a lot of shifts in a row. And again, because we didn't have the ability to view that and be transparent about that, we decided to put some guardrails around that and do restriction of shifts unless there was the ability for either our OAs, which are nursing supervisors, or our staffing coordinators to be able to override that. Next slide. Emily's going to talk about how GE helped us.
With any project, we normally don't like to take it on ourselves. So we actually got GE, the vendor, to help us with a lot of these processes, because they've been there and done that before. So we actually worked with GE as they conducted our design sessions, and they called them discovery sessions, with departmental supervisors. And we're very large, that encompassed many, many meetings. They then helped us, because we'd never done it before, with the configuration and build. We built the scheduling rules, the profiles, the staffing templates. There was new administrative rules that you had to put in place, activity codes, etc. As they were teaching us to fish. As they were working this and helping us do this, they were teaching us so that at the end of the day, we owned it and we were able to maintain it and add additional. Right now, we are set up to do all of nursing, but we are trained now to be able to do it for more if we roll it out to the radiology department or radiology or any other department in the whole organization. We uploaded position license requirements from our Workday system. We rolled out the new staffing rules that were defined during the discovery sessions. We transitioned from old to new in the scheduling process. We trained all of the supervisors and the schedulers on how to use the new system. They helped us with the mobile application implementation. They showed us how to set up security requirements and assisted in troubleshooting when we actually did do the go-live support. Next slide, please. Memorial Hermann's project team. You ask on Memorial Hermann's side who all was involved, it was a lot. We had the Human Resources Department involved. We had the Payroll Department involved. We had IT involved, but most importantly, we had the nursing at the facilities involved. So it was a lot of effort, but the IT people did the majority of the configuration and build. They assisted with some of the stuff that GE was here to do so that we could learn how to do on our own once GE was gone. We did our own project management, but I have to say that GE also provided a project manager. We're such a large group, 200 locations in the city of Houston, that we conducted these meetings on site at most of the facilities, and that organizing of those meetings alone was quite the task. We prepared project documentation and training material. We did work with GE on some starts, but ours was specific for the Memorial Hermann side. We then worked with marketing and communication. We did this so that we could ensure that they liked the caliber of material we were putting out. We didn't just do it by the seat of our pants. We made sure that it looked like quality material. We conducted the training for open shift notification, meaning all of the nurses had to understand if they got this notice on their phone, what it meant and what to do about it. We conducted process training sessions, and we prepared all communications for the employees. This wasn't a project that just went live easily. There was a lot of communications and a lot of pieces and parts, a lot of communication to be done. Once we did actually go live, we did post-go live support for probably 3 weeks, but you continued on every time there was a new pay period and a new schedule time. All right, slide 16, Jessica.
So just to piggyback on what Emily was saying, we really looked at and made sure that we weren't doing this kind of big bang and then just saying, okay, we implemented this project and now go do it and tell us what those results are. We were very specific about a timeline. We created the timeline at the beginning of the project. I think retrospectively, it was an aggressive timeline. It seemed going through that things were sometimes going really fast and then other things were taking a really long time. But we were very thoughtful about what we did. So January in 2017, we did the contract negotiation and we knew we were going all the way through March of 2017 for the project planning. We actually kicked the project off in April and then started discovery sessions with GE May through June of 2017. In those discovery sessions, what we were looking for was what was the current practice since we didn't have a standard across our system with scheduling. It was interesting what we found. We found all different kinds of scheduling practices across the system, from scheduling on an actual flip calendar, maybe like a kitty cat calendar or something cute like that, to scheduling on a piece of paper, to scheduling in Excel, to also using what we currently had with GE and scheduling in the project. Some units we found weren't even doing a schedule at all. They were just under the premise that, okay, everyone works Monday through Friday, 8 hours, and that's what we do. After we looked at the discovery sessions, we did a gap analysis, and then we started doing the configuration, build, and validation of the upgrade in the new system. I think the bulk of the work was in doing the user training, and that happened October 17 through November 17. That was taking what we had from the global design. That was the group, the staff that made the rules of scheduling. And looked at what does that look like and what does that standard across our system mean, and then training people to go in. We called them FSAs, or facility administrators. Of each hospital had one or more than one, depending on the size of the hospital, and they were that super user, that go-to person in the facility to be able to help different units and different people with this new GE product that we are putting out. So we did a phased approach for the go live. We did over 350 departments. What we were doing in the first phase of the go live is we were showing everyone how to use that CSO screen, or the central staffing screen. That's that screen that gives you the oversight of what's going on in the unit, or if you had multiple units, what's going on in your multiple units. It was also to explain to staff and show them what does qualified staff mean, and making sure that we had the right qualifications for the right units. With a system as big as ours, we couldn't call an ICU an ICU, or a med surge a med surge. There were different qualifications in different ones that may have been on top of the standard that we said that we were going to have across the system. And then the last thing, which was kind of the fun part, was showing staff how to use the mobile app and showing them how to see their schedule from their phone, and then also how to get those notifications and what to do with it, like Emily said, when we do send out a need for a staff. After that, in February of 2008, we did the second phase, and that was the actual open shift notification. And what that was is it was teaching the schedulers and the leaders of what do they need to do to send out an open shift notification. One of the most important things that we found out after the fact, and I'll talk a little bit about it in the next slide, is that we needed to make sure that that first phase, that the staff knew, the leaders knew how to use that CSO screen. They knew how to update their staffing, either based on the census, whether it was going up or down, or also whether there were sick calls, or if they flexed somebody off, or they pushed somebody back, or somebody had to go home early, or they had to bring somebody in. Because the open shift notification won't work unless you update your staffing. And so that was a really important part of the second phase go live. Next slide. some of the challenges with this project and the implementation was in some areas we needed to do some rework. I think that there was a little bit of information. It goes along to the saying, you know, if you have bad data in, you get bad data out. And so that was a challenge in the beginning. I think we made some assumptions with this project, and then we had to do some rework. I think the most important thing, if you're thinking about doing something like this, is not just the implementation of the technology, but it's also looking at the culture in your organization and making sure that it is conducive to a change like this. And then also finding those pockets of those early adopters, those excited people, and ensuring that they're helping motivate and move the others to this new technology or this new staffing. One of the other challenges that we had was the position license requirements. We had a lot of different thoughts on that, of getting that defined. Do we just do a bare minimum, or do we go really deep into the weeds as far as the license requirements, which would then help us with the individual staff qualifications? And then the last thing that was a challenge, and I talked about it in the previous slide, was just the open shift notification. Getting staff to sign up and making them understand the why behind it, and then also having the schedulers not use the group text, which they were so used to, and using this broadcast feature in the computer, and explaining why. Why do we not want you to text? We don't want you to text anymore. We want you to use this broadcast because then we can pull data from it. The other thing was that to mitigate that, we did a lot of web training sessions. We worked with marketing to make this really exciting. We developed facility level and system level processes. And then really just for the last couple of months have just gone back, pulled data, and reminded people of how important this is, not just to us, but them as well. Next slide. One of the great things about the system, like I said, is it's the data that you get out of it. There are lots of reports that you can pull to look at how do we know that we're driving the right behavior, and how this is helping us. And so you can look at staffing hours in comparison to the schedule. You can look at, you know, are you scheduled to your schedule period? How many days before do you need? Looking at a comparison need. You can look at your shifts filled according to the schedule. You can look at all different kinds of utilization reports. You can look at premium pay versus hours worked. IT at Memorial Hermann, we are very blessed at our system. I'll just say that they are a great group, and they really do listen to the end users and the operators at the hospital. And so they've created some reports that have helped us too, of looking at daily maintenance. That's the update of the census and staffing. Also, how many people are doing it. They've helped us with reports of open shift notifications, either by the user or by the facility. And then last, which was really important, is the number of employees who have signed up for broadcasting. Next slide. So in the beginning, when we looked at it, GE looked at our current costs of what we were doing and gave us an ROI on some estimates. They had indicated that we would have a cost savings achieved for this by reducing overtime by 5%, reducing agency spend by 50%, and then reducing turnover by 2%. We've only implemented the software for RNs, and so as far as the overtime calculations and the turnover costs, it was very limited, but we did achieve the goal that we said that we would for our system. And then we also, in the business case, projected that we would have a 25% savings in contract labor, and that was lowered because then GE said in the 50%, because before GE came and we implemented this, we were already working on reducing contract labor, so we didn't want to double count something. Next slide. So as you can see here, our RN overtime, we were really high on that with a 5% reduction. The estimated savings was around $1.8 million. Our agency spend at 25% reduction was at about 6.5 million, and then the turnover cost, and that was through employee engagement, we were at 2%, was the estimated savings of 2 million. And I can say that for that total of the $10.2 million that we said that we would come to through this project, we not only met that, but we exceeded that. Next slide.
I want to piggyback on what Jessica said on the return on investment. We did have a awesome outcome of our savings when we calculated it after our go live. The problem is we have to honestly say that we were doing two other initiatives. One was calling patient care redesign, and one was calling restructuring for the future. And we had multiple efforts working on overtime and agency staffing. So it is very difficult to attribute all of that savings to this project. But we do know that we did achieve that savings for the year. So we're going to take total credit for it, right, Jessica?
Oh, but yes.
The reality is, I'd be hard pressed to prove that all of our savings came from just this project, because like every facility or hospital organization across the country right now, we're all working on reducing expenses, and we're all working on increasing the patient care efforts. So I'd love to say that the $11 million savings that we found was totally attributed to this project. I can't, but I can tell you that we have had a lot of success, and without this product, we would be back in the old ages now. I mean, it's so nice for the nurses to be able to use their devices. It's so nice for managers to be able to approve time on their devices. So I do have to say this project is something that we're very proud of. We do have more to do. We do have to ensure that we maintain our maintenance. We do have to improve our utilization of staff notification. We find some of the facilities fall back in their old habits of calling nurses that like they always have, but they have definitely stopped using agency to a large extent, and the staffing group is more aware of overtime now because it's right on their screens when they're using our tool. So we're very proud of this. I did include all of my staff and our email addresses. So if you have any IT questions or you want to just talk offline via email, here's some of my staff, my directors, my manager, and some of my lead people's staff. And we also included my 3 sponsors. I was lucky enough in the IT department to have 3 leaders who co-chaired this project for us. Jessica, who at the time was the CNO, but now she's the COO at the Cypress Hospital. So she's a nurse and an operator. Thank you, Jessica. We also had Karen Myers. Karen Myers is the Chief Nursing Officer of the Texas Medical Center Memorial Hermann facility. And then Ann Hollingsworth was our HR comp and benefits person. And it was so nice to have everybody engaged and owning this. Nobody, if we failed, we all failed. And I think that's a big lessons learned, that if you're going to take on a project like this, you for sure make sure you have operational desire and operational commitment and operational ownership. And you have to have the IT people, but without the operational people, there's no way this project could even left the ground. So very proud of this project. And I think now we'd like to go to some questions. So we're going to open it up and give you some time to ask questions and go from there.
All right. Thank you both for that fantastic presentation. We're now beginning today's question and answer session. Please submit any questions you have by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. We'll try to get through as many questions as we have time for. I'll turn the floor over now to Bill Christie to lead our Q&A discussion.
Thank you very much. So Emily, first question is for you. There were a lot of people from different disciplines within Memorial Hermann involved in this project. How was the team created, and how did you foster collaboration within the team?
The team was created. The idea actually began in the nursing environment where they said, hey, we need something like this. They then collaborated with our HR department. HR department got on the program as well, we went to what's called our investment council here at Memorial Hermann, where we could make sure that the organization was going to invest in this technology and actually allow us to move forward with the project. From the investment council, we decided that we needed to make sure we had a strong sponsor leadership group. That's how we got the nurse executive, the COO, and the HR person to team up with me, the IT person. We then had enough people to be able to bring it to each facility. We had the people that had operational responsibilities at facilities, so we went to the chief nursing officers' meetings and we presented this and we got feedback. We then went to every single facility to ensure that we understood what their processes were so that during design, nobody was left out. So it was very collaborative, but very time intensive to make sure that you got to hear everybody's voice. I think we did a pretty good job of it.
I think the results speak for themselves, Emily. Thank you. Jessica, next question is for you. How do you think this project has impacted staff engagement at Memorial Hermann?
I would say it significantly positively impacts staff engagement. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, one of the goals was to put staffing into the hands of the frontline providers rather than having it be a push down. It was actually a push up, which significantly helped them. I also think that the visibility of them on their device to be able to see their schedule and to see their timesheet and to be able to see where open shifts are and with the click of a button say yes I can work or no I can't helped a lot. I also think that through this project, us partnering with the different hospitals and the staff helped with engagement as well. It wasn't like we did this in a bubble. We really got a lot of feedback and a lot of input. Even when we were in the beginning doing the variable staff model, we went and had forums and explained to the staff, got what their perception of it was. And we actually did some changes and tweaks due to input that we got from the staff. So I would say overall it was a plus. We did do this, as Emily said, just with nursing, but I already have staff and leaders in other areas, one of them being imaging right now, that really want to start this. They said, you know, we want to do this too. We don't want to wait. And so that tells me that the staff have been wanting to do this for a while.
Excellent. Emily, next question is for you. What's next for your workforce management strategy?
That's a twofold answer. As Jessica mentioned earlier, we've got departments outside of nursing asking for this. So we need to expand what we've done for nursing to the rest of the operational organization. And secondly, we need to focus on acuity. We currently don't staff based on the acuity of our nursing, of our patients. And I think we need to focus on that and move forward on that. Those would be the two next efforts that I think we'll go for.
Excellent, Jessica. Next question. How did your nurse managers react to this initiative?
I think overall it was a positive reaction. I think with any system as big as ours, not everyone is going to buy into any type of change. I do think that the ones that were very positive, those early adopters that had embraced this, they did help us facilitate bringing on the late laggers forward. I think retrospectively, again, looking at how we implemented this, one of the things that if we were to do this again, what I would suggest is a little bit of some change management people. When you have a system as large as ours, and you could see from what Emily was talking about in the first couple of slides that we've been serving the community for over 100 years, there's lots of practices that are embedded and entrenched. We have a lot of senior leaders here. And so for some of them, it was very difficult for them to let go of their old habits. It's something that we continue to work on, but I would say overall it has been a huge positive. One of the positives for the nurse leaders has been is that they're not spending as much time on the schedule. the implementation of the standardization and then the technology on top of it has really let them focus on not that scheduling task and focus on other more important things. And I would say that that was important to them.
Excellent. And you mentioned the change management, definitely looking forward, that there's a big part of change management being one of those areas to really help to enable that moving forward.
I would say, I mean, don't you agree, Emily, with that was one of the things that would have helped move this forward?
And yes, I agree that we had the project management in place. The change management was underestimated. Yes.
Excellent. So, Emily, next question for you. Would it be fair to say that even if it was not the direct contributor to the ROI, that the other initiatives were enhanced, enabled by this underlying change in technology?
Yes, that would be a definite case. And why am I following on the questions and not seeing that one? Could you repeat the question? Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. So the question is, would it be fair to say that even if it was not the direct contributor to the ROI, that the other initiatives were enhanced, enabled by this underlying change in technology?
Yes, I would say that this change in technology has to come to every facility eventually. With all the technology out there and all the consumer and mobile applications coming, it's just a matter of time before our staff insist on having this type of technology. With it comes benefits to the organization, but I think with it comes benefits to the staff.
Excellent. Next question, Jessica, is for you. So do you use a centralized staffing office that encompasses all facilities in your system?
That's a yes and a no. So we do have a centralized staffing office. They can see everything within the facility in my time and schedule. There was a lot of talk about moving staffing within the acute care hospitals to central staffing. I think that with the changes that we have going on within my time and schedule that we implemented, and on top of the other just changes within our system and those projects that we were working on, the feasibility of doing that wasn't an overall positive, so we didn't do that. So how we do staffing is that we have some hospitals, depending on the size, have staffers or schedulers. Some have their nursing supervisors, or we call them OAs, that do staffing. And so our model is that the hospital itself staffs, and then if there is a greater need that the hospital can't fill, but they need the regional float person or the system float person to be able to fill that, then all of those requests are looked at and filled by our central staffing. So it's kind of like a 1/3, 2/3 right now.
Emily, next question. So you mentioned you were working on other projects that possibly contributed to the overtime cost reduction. What were those projects?
It's probably a better question for Jessica, but to be honest with you, we have bringing awareness of where exactly we are with scheduling. With overtime on a regular basis in reports, focusing on it at the MORs to identify that there is an issue or that there is highly overtime being used. Jessica, do you have specifics on any overtime initiatives outside of those two?
One of the things that we really did also, which was an initiative side by side with this, is that we looked at the number of new grad nurses that we were bringing into the system, and realized that we didn't have a big enough pipeline. And so one of the initiatives that we did simultaneous with this is that we increased the number of new grads that we were bringing into the system, and that really did help us reduce our overtime and contract labor. We didn't have a lot of visibility into what that pipeline looked like because, again, it wasn't standardized. So we standardized that and put it under one system person that was looking all across the 15 hospitals. And once we increased those numbers, that did significantly help reduce our overtime.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. Emily, back to you. Do you have a productivity tool? And if so, how does this information interface?
For productivity, we use, Jessica, what's the name of that application?
We use Truven benchmarks for productivity.
And it's widely used at all of our locations, and it does not have an interface. This information does not interface with this project.
Well, let me rephrase that though, Emily. It does and it doesn't. So how it interfaces is that when the different units build their staffing grids, which are the numbers on the bottom, what the staffing grids are based on it's your productivity number. And so each unit has, hours per patient day, or they have hours per visit, or whatever their RVU is. And so each year in our budget, every little area has been given their RVU and then what their productivity number is. And so then that gets loaded into my time and schedule through doing their matrix. And then what happens is the interface that we pull from Cerner that gives us the census then looks at what matrix they're at, which then tells us what staff that they need.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jessica. Next question is for you, Jessica. I think you answered it earlier, but just to reiterate. So do you use schedulers, and if so, are they unit-based or hospital-wide?
We do not have any unit-based schedulers. We do, like I said earlier, use schedulers. It's based on hospital size. The majority of the larger hospitals, like the Medical Center, Memorial City, Southwest, Southeast, the Woodlands, they have schedulers. And then the other type of smaller hospitals, Katy, Cypress, Sugarland, they don't have schedulers, but what they do is they use their nursing supervisors, or we call them OAs here, and that's who they use to schedule.
Thank you. Emily, you mentioned earlier that you had difficulty in getting people to sign up for broadcasting. Can you elaborate on that difficulty?
I'd have to say that the fact that the nurses have to go in and make sure their competencies or their credentials are up to date in the HR system, that then qualifies them for broadcasting for a position. And I think that it's easy to fall back in our old ways. Some of the nursing units that are some of the nurse staffing groups that are trying to fill slots fall back in their old ways and go to calling the people that they know that will answer those shifts, and they don't use the broadcasting. And others haven't filled out their appropriate information in the HR system. And so when a broadcast does go out, they don't necessarily meet the qualifications so that they don't get the broadcast. So it's a twofold problem. And I think we have improved greatly on that. And it's probably one of the biggest unthought of consequences or challenges that we'd had to take, but that's what it was.
So thank you for that. So Emily, another question for you. What percentage of your nurse staff use mobile?
Do you know that, Jessica? I mean, I've watched some of the stats. I think it's fairly high, but I don't know right off the top of my head. Do you?
I want to say right now it's around like 70 to 80%.
I would have said the same.
Wow. That is very impressive.
Yep.
Jessica, question for you. What are your future targets for FTE, part-time, overtime, flex pool, contract labor staffing mix?
Okay, full-time, part-time, we like to be around 85%. Overtime, we just started our fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts in July, and so across the system, overtime is set at 3%. The flex pool, which includes PRN people, so it's your local PRN, then we have regional PRN, and then the system PRN. We want that around 15% of the whole staffing matrix, and then our goal for contract labor is 0. And we are doing really, really well on that. On that one slide where you saw that the contract labor was in the 25 millions, we have significantly reduced that. The hospital I'm at, we've never used contract labor, and I would say 60% of the hospitals out of the 15 have had zero contract labor in the last year and have maintained that. So it's a real positive.
Very impressive indeed. Jessica, another question for you. Are any of the staff being scheduled in your system members of collective bargaining units with contracted work rules?
No, Memorial Hermann has 0 hospitals that are part of a union. And then in the state of Texas, the only rule that we have through the Board of Nursing as far as ratios or anything like that is that in ICU, there's a ratio of the 1 to 2 patients.
Excellent. Emily, question for you. What % of departments accounted for the ROI? And do you feel adding additional departments would have increased the ROI further?
Like I said, the nursing staff are the only one we went live with. And I'd say that's, 50 or 60% of our, I think we have 12,000 nurses at 25,000 employees. So that's less than 50% went live with this. Yes, definitely. As we bring on additional units, we will increase our ROI, both not in agency as much, but there are some areas that do actually use agency, but definitely in the overtime.
Excellent. Jessica, for you, how do units communicate to the staffing office their staffing needs, and how often do you request predictive staffing needs?
So we have huddles or bed huddles. We have them 3 times throughout the day with all of the staffing office, the nursing supervisor, OA, and the charge nurses. We have them at 8:30, 3:30, and 3:30 in the morning. But 24/7, the staffing office is able to look at that CSO or that screen and see the needs down on the bottom. What it does, and it's really nice, is every 4 hours it pulls a census, and then based on that and the staffing matrix that the units have placed, they can see, and it's a really nice color. If it's red, it means that they are short-staffed. If it's gray, it means that they've met and they're right on their staffing needs. And if it's blue, it means that they're overstaffed. And that shows and lets the staffing office know, is do they need to move people around? Do they need to figure out to cancel somebody? Do they need to look and bring somebody in? The other thing that we can do is just the old-fashioned pick up the phone and scream help. So that's basically what we do.
Thank you. Emily, how many FSAs or functional system administrators and super users do you have for each solution?
Each facility has FSAs for this product, for the project that we're talking about. It depends on the size of the facilities. Some of them have as few as 2, but I think TMC has 5. So it depends on the size of the organization.
So it's predicated off numbers of users per site, correct?
Right. And units that they're managing.
And units they're managing. Okay, thank you. Jessica, for you, did this project extend to the OR peri-op areas? And were there any significant differences or challenges in this setting?
Yes, so it did extend to all perioperative services. It extended into endoscopy and the cath lab. I would say that that took a little bit of longer adoption, those groups, than the regular floors. I would also say that it took a little bit more work for them to understand how to schedule. The nice thing about this system is that in a lot of ORs, they don't do self-scheduling. It's basically you work, 4 10s and you start at this time or that time. And so the ability of the system is that you can create a schedule and then just copy and paste it over into the next 6 weeks. What the difficult thing for the procedural areas was to look at copying, pasting the schedule, and then putting on top of that the call schedule, and then moving things around. I'll give you an example. In the quote-unquote daily maintenance, if somebody calls in sick and they're working a shift plus they're on call, You take those two out, which is the easy part, but if you bring somebody in and one person's working the shift and you're trying to do 3 different people to pick up the call, it took us a little bit of a longer time to teach them how to put that in, so that when we are doing these analytics and we're pulling data, we're able to get the true story. But I can say that I think that we're over that hump, and we're getting to the point where all of the procedural areas are not having as much difficulty adopting this.
Emily, for you, are your employees required to attest to their time?
Currently, for this project, nurses do clock in and clock out. What we do is a lunch attestation, and this lunch attestation is good for all employees, not just nursing. As the employee clocks out, it asks them, are they clocking out for the day? If they answer yes, it then asks them, did they take a lunch? If they answer yes, it will then charge a 30-minute lunch period. If they answer no, it then gives them full time for pay. So that's the attestation. They do clock in and out, and we have a lunch attestation.
Thank you very much, Emily. Next question, Jessica, for you is, how does the RN staff compensation in your pools compare to core unit-based staff?
I'm guessing that might be the float pools. What we do is we have a tiered approach for PRN. So we have a base rate for PRN staff. The base rate for the PRN staff that are working on the unit level, their rate is the same rate as a full-time, part-time, and they get a $1.50 differential. And then if you go up to the regional pool, or the hospital pool, then you get a higher differential. When you go to the regional, you get a higher differential on that, and then all the way up to system, which is the highest differential. The reason why we did that is that so when we're looking across the board at PRN staff, the nurses coming into this, they all have the same base rate depending on years of experience. And then all we're doing is adding a differential on, are they unit-based? Are they hospital-based? Are they part of the regional-based, or are they system-based? And that differential starts at $1.50 and then goes all the way up to $6 extra an hour. And that has been a huge benefit and help for us across the system.
Thank you. Emily, a follow-on to the attestation question. Does the manager have to approve the lunch attestation?
Actually, for these staff, managers have to approve the time period. So when they're approving the time, it approves the lunch attestation. It's not a separate effort. Jessica, correct me, but I think that's correct. Am I not right?
Yes, and we're trying to get to the goal across the system of having staff approve their own time first, and then the manager still does have to approve it, but giving a little bit of ownership and accountability to the staff to manage their own time and pay.
Jessica, earlier on you mentioned having census data in the CSO screen. How do you pull the census data into the CSO screen?
So there's an interface between my time and schedule and the census that we have in our EMR, which we use Cerner. And so at first when it was pulling it, it wasn't completely accurate because it wasn't pulling heads in a bed, it was pulling inpatient stays. And so we worked with our group in the decision support to make sure that they were pulling heads in a bed. And so once we thought that we had that correct through the interface, then what we did is we tested it for a week every 4 hours to make sure that it was accurate. We actually just recently found out that when we were pulling a census in our postpartum or family life unit, that we weren't pulling an accurate census, and just updated that. We were only pulling mom. We weren't pulling baby with mom. And so we recently just fixed that to help them out with an accurate staffing model for them.
Great. Thank you so much. So this is all the time we have for today. I want to thank all our presenters for their excellent presentation and our audience for participating today. All registrants will be emailed the presentation slides and recording this week. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars.